And good evening, everybody. Thursday night, it is that time of the week. Bishop and the Rabbi, welcome. I hope you're doing great. Go ahead and sign on in, everybody from all across the country and increasingly around the world. We've had more and more folks tuning in from Europe and from Latin America, and even a few from Asia. So exciting, glad to be with you. But of course, as you know, I am not here. Right now, I'm not here. Normally we are live, but tonight is, I believe, our last night in Israel. And I know that most of you have been following along on social media. We've had this incredible trip, 25 pastors, I think 20 of them from America, 2 from Canada, 2 from Great Britain, and 1 from Guam. And it's been our privilege to introduce all of them to the land and the people of Israel. You know, when God gave his covenants to the earth, he entrusted the people of Israel with a book and with the land. And the land speaks to our souls in a way that you cannot imagine. If you have never been to Israel, I want to exhort you. Every Christian, at least once in their life, should purpose in their heart to make a holy pilgrimage to Israel. You don't go to Israel as a tourist. You don't go there to view archaeology. You go there as a spiritual pilgrim to be elevated in your sense of connection to God, to connect to the stories of the Bible, to connect to the Holy Spirit that is sacred in that place. It is a life-changing trip, and I want to invite you to join me. We are going back, finally, our first trip since COVID opened to the public. We're going back September the 28th. I think it's to, September 27th to October 8th. We're go right now to awakejerusalem.com. That's awakejerusalem.com. They'll have that in the comments. And join us this year in Jerusalem. We are so excited to get back. Thank you to our partners. You're investing in the lives of these 25 young pastors. Can I tell you that it is probably one of the most gratifying things in my life. I think of Pastor Doug Reed. I think of Pastor Adam Mesa. I think of Pastor Luke Cobray. I think of Pastor Michael Wood. And the list goes on and on. Young pastors who had never been to Israel, had no sense of connection to Israel or the Jewish people. We were able to bring them on our trip. And now they have been back to Israel over and over and over again. They've brought their congregations with them. They're leading trips. It is probably the highlight of what we do, able to expand and broad. You know, we talk a lot about anti-Semitism. I believe the strongest way to fight anti-Semitism is to encourage philo-Semitism, to grow philo-Semitism. So if we will simply grow the supporters and lovers of the Jewish people and of the Jewish state of Israel, it's one of the most powerful ways that we can light a candle against the darkness of anti-Semitism. Well, I'm coming back tomorrow. We're flying back to the States tomorrow, but we're taping this ahead of time. And there's no one who has been, literally no one on planet Earth, has been at the forefront of fighting anti-Semitism and fighting in general extremism and the worst impulses of humanity than our esteemed guest tonight. He is known in presidential palaces all around the world. He meets with prime ministers, with presidents, with kings and rulers all around the world. He is on media constantly. He's in the public eye at all times. He is a man who is universally respected and to some degree, I don't want to say feared, but in the sense that when he comes into the room, there is a gravitas, there is a seriousness, because he speaks truth. And that truth comes and cuts through a lot of lies and a lot of false spin that we see so often in the media. I'm talking about, of course, none other than our esteemed friend from the Simon Wiesenthal Center, Rabbi Abraham Cooper. Would you welcome him tonight? Rabbi Cooper, there you are. Great to see you, sir. Thank you for coming back to be with us on Bishop and the Rabbi.
Well, thank you, Bishop. And I can tell you straight out, I'm jealous because I have to wait a little bit longer before I can reconnect to the Holy Land, hopefully for Passover we have a lot of investments there,
Yes.
including 2 daughters, son-in-law, and 8 grandchildren. So we
Wow.
can't wait to get back. And there's so much. It's a new Middle East now, in many ways, an
Right.
old Middle East. The new Middle East is to be able to sit back and watch a defense minister from Israel sit and have tea with the king of Bahrain, our good friend, and
Yes.
what's going on between UAE, Israel, and the Jewish people, Morocco, and there'll be many, many others down the line. But we're in a race
Yes.
against time between the folks who've decided to invest in mutual respect and rekindling relationships and friendships. And then we have countries controlled by the likes of the Ayatollah Khomeini, who's about this close to being able to go nuclear. So, like everything else in life, it's there are big challenges out there, but also for people who are believers, and we are, a lot of hope, and
Right.
the good Lord expects us to be good partners along that path. And I know that's been your guiding light with the young Christian leaders that you've taken to Israel, and I'll use the term shepherded through a growth process. And I'll just add that when it comes to the holy city of Jerusalem, I've always said this. I've said this to my friend Sri Ravi Shankar, who's a Swami, a Hindu, and many imams I've brought now to Israel, and people of other faiths or no faith, that there is something special and unique about the light of Jerusalem. And I
Yes.
do believe that the good Lord has waiting for each of us a little unique piece of that light that only
Yes.
you individually can take ownership on. You can't get it virtually. You can have 62 cameras on your next iPhone. It's not the same. It's
Right.
there. It's waiting for you. It's kind of like a spiritual infusion. And you need not to be Jewish, only Jewish, to apply.
Right.
So I applaud your continuing support for Israel and bringing people on their faith path to reclaim a piece of that light for their own souls and their own future.
Well, when you talk about that special light of Jerusalem, I can't help but thinking of the great anthem, the great song, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Jerusalem of Gold. And it's really kind of the hymn of Jerusalem. And one of my prized possessions for my 40th birthday several years ago, the Eagles Wings community got together, and Nomi Shemer, who penned that song, I have the actual copy in her actual handwriting of the music and the lyrics that she signed. They bought it at the Artza Art Gallery next to the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. It's one of my, I was overwhelmed to have that little piece of history. But really, Rabbi, what we're reminding people is our spiritual life, the spark of our interest in God, it was born in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the city that is central to the Christian faith. Of course, it was transplanted to Constantinople and to Rome and to other places, but historically it's Jerusalem. And of course, for Christians, that is the place of the conclusion of our faith. Both of our faith communities are looking for the coming of the Messianic age, the coming time of God's rulership, God's peace on the earth, the coming of Messiah. Christians, we believe he'll come for the second time. Jews believe he'll come for the first time. But we're both waiting for the same event. And he's not going to touch down, in Orlando or Tokyo or any of these places. But it's Jerusalem that is the central focus of our faith hope.
Right. Allow me to share a story I actually never told before publicly.
Wow.
We had a little bit to do, small, in helping the building blocks between the Gulf states and Israel over the course in Bahrain of 4 years, and in the UAE, probably 12 years. And nobody knew where it would reach, where it has come. And one particular day, I was accompanying a senior advisor to the ruler of one of those countries. I won't name the country, but by process elimination, it's not a long list.
Right.
And he thought we were going to Tel Aviv. I said, well, first we're going to Jerusalem for a couple of days, then I'll take you to Tel Aviv. We're in the old city. near, I guess what you guys call the seven stations, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit rusty on that. It's not
That's all right.
narrative.
That's more Catholic than us, but we know the Stations of the Cross. Sure. The
So
Via Dolorosa.
we're standing there. The gentleman I'm with is Muslim.
Right.
Okay. And all of a sudden we hear from a distance people singing. Can't quite make it out. It's definitely not Hebrew, and it's definitely not in the top 100 of the old Jewish songs. But we're both curious, so we wait. And it's about 4 or 5 minutes. And sure enough, there is a group of Christians from China
Wow.
who are walking the stations. And they're
Wow.
singing a hymn in Chinese. And the gentleman who was with me turned to me and he said, you know, I think I've seen all I need to see. And I need to report back to my boss.
Wow.
I need for everybody to understand. And later he would say, you know, and now I understand why
Right.
Jerusalem needs to be
Yep.
controlled and safeguarded by the Jewish people. It was an
Yes.
amazing moment.
Well, incredible, and thank you for sharing that. And in the light of sharing kind of stories that have never been told, I just want to remind everybody that 5 days from today, we have our exclusive interview with Ambassador David Friedman. He has released his brand new book, and he called my office. He called me and said, Robert, of all the Christian organizations that we could release with, we want to come to Eagle's Wings first. So we will be the first Christian group, non-Jewish or non-secular group that he is speaking to. So you can go to the website, eagleswings.org, and sign up. You need to get a link to be a part of this, but join us for an amazing conversation. Ambassador Friedman, who I know is a dear friend of yours, Rabbi Cooper, what a you know, I mean, he really partook in history to be able to oversee that process of the shifting of the embassy. And now, of course, the story can be told behind the scenes. We can't wait to hear the stories he's going to tell us in 5 days.
I'm sure it's a great book, and he's a very eloquent individual. And I'm sure you work your hardest to get him to be more forthcoming. It's never been a problem with Ambassador Friedman, so it'll be a wonderful investment of time. And
Yeah.
I think that for those of us who are people of faith, and he is as
Right.
well, we all understand that we each have a piece, could be a mini piece, a larger piece, but we pretty much know at the end of the day who's calling the shots, and that's
Right.
coming from heaven. So to live in this era of renewal, of spiritual challenge, but also of moving forward as you just open the prophets. And the more you read, almost on a daily basis, you see more and more of it coming forward. So I'm sure that'll be a wonderful event. So I know we're talking about the portion of the week coming
We
up.
are.
It's, Shabbat, Ki Tisa. And
for the Christians, let me tell us, we're in Exodus chapter 30, verse 11. That is where we're starting. Exodus 30, verse 11. And Rabbi, before you launch, tell us, what does Ki Tisa mean? What's the literal translation of that?
Ki Tisa actually in this case means that God is speaking to Moses that to count the Jewish people.
Okay.
Now, there were 2 times then the Jews were, counted. Once before the golden calf incident, and once after. And what I really would like to focus on is not that incident per se, but the whole idea of what's called in Hebrew here, the mitzvah of machatzit hashekel. Chatzi in modern Hebrew means half. Shekel, well, that's the current. You can go into a bank, or when you get off the plane at Ben Gurion, you're going to get shekels or shkalim to play with. So it's actually it is part of modern Hebrew as well. Right. But a really very, very interesting thing, because the Israelites are now in the desert. They have slavery in the rear view mirror. And now the question is, what kind of people are actually going to come? So you had the 10 Commandments, Mount Sinai. Then you had the giving of the laws of Mishpatim, which I know that you reviewed.
Mhm.
And then also the introduction of the portable Mishkan,
Right.
in which the building of the portable tabernacle, which eventually is going to be the model for Solomon's temple and beyond. Certain elements of that will actually become part of it, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's very interesting that there's an insistence here that every male Jew who's counted has to give a half a shekel. It says the rich person cannot give more, and the poor person cannot give less. Don't worry, there are many other ways, as you know, when you're fundraising, many other ways to give more, and volunteerism, more money if you can afford it. This is not, but in this particular instance, there's an absolute insistence from God himself that when it comes to this particular commandment to underscore the tabernacle, everybody has to go through exactly the same way. Now, of course, our sages are rather, I think, surprised by this because, first of all, I'm sure it's true of any group, but you deal a lot with Jews, and you know very well you have 2 Jews and 3 opinions. We are, in some ways, a really individualistic lot. Everyone is different. In fact, our sages say, just as no 2 people look exactly alike, no 2 people think alike. So the question is, why in this particular commandment would it be that you don't give 1 shekel or another amount? Why is it only half? So, I mean, you're
Rabbi,
a pastor.
let me just interject as we go there, if I can, for 1 second, because I want to come back to this in a moment. But it says, we're in verse 11. It says, when you take the census, each must pay the Lord a ransom for his life at the time he is counted. That's going to be the half shekel. And then there's this really unusual phrase. It says, then no plague will come on them when you number them. And there's almost like this prophetic foreshadowing, right, of what happens later under King David's reign, when David orders a census and there's a plague released. So there's something about God with census and counting and the individual and the community that God allows it, but he somehow has very strict restrictions in how it is ordered.
Right. So that's actually the second counting after the Israelites have screwed up big time. The first reference I made was to the first counting, but to go to your point, and we talk about a plague and what happened with King David, the Torah is extraordinarily sensitive to the fact that everyone is an individual. When you become a number, when you're reduced to just being a number, watch out. You can build 10 sermons just on that. And especially the young people who are watching, everything about social media. How many hits did you get? How many likes did you get? Does anybody care what the person who pushed that button, what they look like, what they think, what their beliefs are? Take a look at communist China. Take a look at North Korea. When you have totalitarian regimes, it's all about numbers. It's all about isms. It's all about sort of like, if you will, groupthink, sometimes imposed by those who are in power. So the Torah, God is extraordinarily talk about, there can be big problems if you do it. He doesn't want the Jewish people to default ever to that mindset. I mean, obviously, the ultimate horrific example is what happened in the death camps, in the concentration camps, when numbers were burned onto people's arms, that everything the Nazis did during the Holocaust was to dehumanize you, was to shorn your hair off your head, whatever was, unique. Think about what's unique to each of us, how we dress, et cetera, et cetera. When you look at the totalitarian groups, even now, what's happening with the Uyghurs, it is to break the individual and to remold and recast that individual only within a certain system. For some, it's a number. For others, is your individuality is out the window. At the other end of this is the other problem people like us are grappling with every day, which is young people and others in consumer societies.
Yes.
The whole idea there is, what are your feelings? How do you feel today? How do you feel about having police or not having police? All sorts of, never mind, there may be fundamental rules that should guide us. It's all about the feelings of the individual. So I think, just to sort of on a really basic level, is the reason for the half shekel is, first of all, to bring everybody down a notch, relax. No one could do everything on their own. Number two, if you have a lot of money and you're very successful, guess what? You only have half the ticket. So you got to connect with the other half of the ticket with someone who has next to nothing. And to the person who is poor, it may be temporary, it may be permanent, you have value, because no matter what the other person has, you have to have a synergy. There's an equality, and the Bible is actually talking about that imagery, right? That we're the sheep, we're the flock, and God's taking a look. He's count as the flock go by, but it's different when God counts. He can see the difference in each of the sheep. He can see what's going on inside each of our souls. So don't have to worry about the good Lord is only going to lump us up in some big number, but the rest of us could easily fall prey, to that approach. So for me, as problematic and challenging the golden calf incident is, and so we're still paying back on that one for generations. I think the more basic lesson, the more basic takeaway for everyone, whatever your station in life is, it's sort of the dialectic of Judaism, of the Torah, the genius of the Torah, which is, first of all, we want you to know, rich or poor, famous or not, you count. And you count by virtue of the fact of your investment together with that half shekel with the next person next to you. They can own real estate in London, and you might have trouble paying your rent in an apartment. It makes no difference. You are equal. The second takeaway, which again I think is part of the challenge for people of faith in the United States, in North America, beyond, and by the way, especially, we should all be over it soon, during COVID, is that it's not ever just the individual. You need community. Community is what makes it. So it's never either or from the point of view of the Torah. Yes, you have individuality. Yes, you have freedom of choice. God says, you're a slave. You're only going to be a slave to me. You're not going to be a slave to any system or any other individual. You are free. So you have that individuality, including the freedom to screw up if you so choose to do. But beyond that is a reminder that you're part of a much bigger tapestry. So you're bringing to every situation your individuality, but also hopefully your commitment to community. And so much of what we've done with community over our own years and with our children and grandchildren has been put on hold because of COVID. And it's a huge challenge for institutions that serve individuals in the community, including houses of worship, maybe especially houses of worship. It's a tremendously taxing time. But I think it's one of the most important things we should be looking forward to is there will be a time after Zoom, and there will be a time, hopefully soon, to shut off, you'll excuse my Yiddish, the damn computer, iPhone, social media, all the rest of it. Close it up, go outside, get some fresh air, and find and reconnect to community, because we're both, especially Americans, we're so blessed. We can pursue any individual dream. Sometimes we tend to forget that we're also part of a larger society. And for people who lived, let's say, who grew up in the Soviet Union in the previous millennia, which I actually visited back in 1972, that system then and the Chinese system now crushes the individual. It is all about you behave as part of the group, you listen to instructions, and don't lift your head too high because chances are you're going to get crushed. That's how the Iranian regime works, North Korea works. So for people, let's say, unfortunately, Christians right now in Hong Kong, or the believers in other parts of China where churches have been destroyed.
Right.
That's the other piece of it, which is to remind you as an individual believer, they can't take that from you unless you let them. So it's community and it's individual. And that's why you have the half shekel each way.
Rabbi, I think you're hitting on the core question, frankly, not only within Judaism and Christianity, but within all faith groups in this new modern age. And that is, how are we going to not allow technology and the group think that comes with technology? How are we going to not allow that to dehumanize us? Because there is this place of just mass group think and group follow. We see that in China with the social credit system being rolled out. That's very, very scary. And people being reduced to numbers. There's a famous line from Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. He sings a song. I recorded the song in one of my albums. It's called "Close Every Door," and Joseph says, "You gave me a number instead of my name." There's that dehumanizing aspect, and these things, though they promise social connectivity, though they promise, a greater sense of collegiate, they provide the exact opposite. Everything is a mile wide and an inch deep. And Rabbi, as I've been meditating on this, I've been feeling more and more, don't you think, amazingly, that part of the answer to that question is Shabbat? I think part of the answer to that question is Shabbat. That we recapture that place, shut everything off, turn it all off, gather together with family and friends, light the candles, hold the challah, engage in tactile things, unplugged, unfettered by the technology, and go. Is Shabbat part of the answer to this dehumanizing that's happening?
So let me tell you a story about my late grandfather, Samuel Pidziba. So he was a heavy smoker of Lucky Strike filterless cigarettes from the age of about 12. When he was 70, his doctor said to him, "Look, Mr. Pidziba, you either stop smoking or you're going to lose your legs." And amazingly, at the age of 70, he quit and lived to be, I think, around 92. Now the question is, what does that have to do with your question?
Right.
Here's the answer. I didn't realize it when I was a kid watching him. But actually, for 25 hours once a week, he did go cold turkey. He wouldn't smoke on Shabbat. So
Wow.
he already, of course, we didn't know tobacco and what it did to you. Let's just
No,
say by
back
Saturday
then they told you it
afternoon,
was good for you.
right, by Saturday afternoon at 7 p.m., you didn't want to be anywhere near this guy. He was going through nicotine withdrawal. But in the end, it's the Shabbat that saved him because he
Wow.
already knew he could stop.
Wow.
So when you're asking me, I'm just kind of a very lucky person because Shabbat is also portable. And it also means that people who don't like us very much, who know me, they love Shabbat too, because they know I'm not going to call them. I'm not going to put out a tweet or a press release. They
Right.
get 25-hour reprieve every
Yes.
week. And I have to say, for the record, that I'm not smart enough to come up with this idea. Okay. And I'm just lucky that in my faith system, it's already
Yes.
built in,
Yes.
because when we talk about the creativity of the rest of the week,
Right.
that kind of creativity is what God wants us to put on hold, just as a friendly reminder about at the end of the day, who's really in charge. It really is amazingly liberating.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be Saturday, but what it does force you is got to talk to your spouse at the table. You've got
Yep.
kids and grandchildren. There's no escape. You have to rediscover the lost art of conversation. And
Yes.
it is actually, I think, I would agree with you, an idea whose time has come. Let me also just share with you, because I know we're going to talk for a moment about Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism. And I was with the Simon Wiesenthal, our great namesake, in 1980 at a university in the Midwest. And a student asked him the following question: Mr. Wiesenthal, could it happen again?
Mm.
So Simon and his wife lost 89 members of their family. He barely survived. The American troops who liberate, he was too weak to even stand when they came to Mauthausen to liberate. Another week he would have starved to death. And he said the following: if you have a situation where you have hate plus a crisis plus technology, anything is possible. Now, in 1980, for someone who was born towards the beginning of the 20th century, technology meant to Mr. Wiesenthal, from what he saw looking in the rearview mirror of his life, radio was brand new, the Nazi propaganda films, and the staging of masks, etc. Child's play to where we are today. And he said the following: if in 1492 the Spaniards had access to the technology that he was talking about, no Jew would have survived in Spain, no Catholic would have survived in England, no Protestant would have survived in France. Now, fast forward to 2022 and everything that you've spoken about, technology on a good day is neutral. We've seen the tech giants, instead of taking down the bigots, the racists, the homophobes, and the anti-Semites, they took the easy way out, going political and getting involved with presidential politics, coming up with their own definition for what is, real and misinformation. And all of a sudden we wake up and we say, hey, wait a second, who died and elected you guys Pope? So a lot of people in a lot of different domains are sort of waking up, but the Torah in that sense is just rock solid. We're going to win or lose this because of values. And I think, you've had my dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Yitzhak Adlerstein, on many times.
Yes, just a few weeks ago, he was with us again, yeah. Right.
So for us, the Wiesenthal Center, it's not about interfaith. It's about multi-faith.
Yep.
Honestly, I don't have a lot of time to talk about theological debates and how a particular prayer may or may not. It's interesting to me, but that's not where it's at. Where I make my relationships, that includes a person like yourself, is I'm looking for people who want to make the world a better place. And I've traveled the world from Indonesia to Buenos Aires and a lot of places in between. The cultures are profoundly different. There are different languages. Everywhere, there are good people who want to make the world a better place. Those are the folks that I choose to make common cause with. And those are exactly the kind of people who can do the building blocks for peace. You're always going to need the nation states and the diplomats and the treaties. They'll sign the documents. But if you don't do the other lifting, you're not really going to have peace, because only people make peace.
Yes, that's right. That is right. 100% right. People make peace, not organizations, not nation states. People make peace. Rabbi, we've got to let you go in just a moment or two, but your position as really the premier voice speaking out on anti-Semitism, we can't have you on without referencing something that just a week or two ago was very much in the national conversation, which was these comments that I couldn't believe by Whoopi Goldberg on The View, saying that the Holocaust was an expression of inhumanity, but not an expression of racism.
Right.
And, I think to myself, I mean, she makes her living, having conversations every day. And so you would think that she would be astute on what is obviously the most horrific genocide in all of human history. And even her co-hosts tried to clarify and correct her remarks, and she kind of dug her heels in. Enough has been said about Whoopi, but speak to us a moment for the record about, the importance of these definitions and what the takeaway is from an obviously, glaring challenge like that one that we all endured.
So, number one, Whoopi Goldberg's not an anti-Semite. We know her for many years. Rabbi Heyer was in touch with her in case she wants to come by and bring her program to the Museum of Tolerance. So from the beginning, like you, and I was trying to figure out, where did this come from?
Right.
Why? And actually, if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. We have had, in the course of these last few years, even before COVID, the tearing down of monuments and other attacks on history.
Yep.
One of the attacks is not about monuments, but is about concepts. Yep. And so there are people and even institutions, and even Jewish institutions, that now say that racism has only one target: people of color. So if you hear that day in and day out in your cultural milieu where The View populates,
right,
and then you take that definition and grid it over onto the 6 million Jews, it doesn't compute. It was a horrible thing, but it certainly wasn't racism. So the actual definition, and this actually comes because we're talking to a Christian leader, back a little over 20 years ago at the United Nations World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa.
Sure.
Which I was the spokesman for the Jewish groups during with the NGOs, the keepers of civil society. That's where Israel apartheid was born, where it was birthed by the civil society leaders. And in the closing Saturday night of that full week, disastrous week, there was a book about yay thick with all the resolutions, some of them horrifically anti-Semitic. I'll never forget, it was in a big tent on a soccer field, and a woman stepped up to the mic. She was a representative of the World Council of Churches. And she said, if everyone will turn to, section 25, 3A, it says here, condemns the firebombing of 3 synagogues near Paris, and the anti-Semitism that caused it. And she, at the microphone, said, we're here for a conference on racism. What does anti-Semitism have to do with racism? I moved to strike that one little sentence in the sea of filth. And by voice vote, they struck it from the record. There, I think, were maybe 30 Jews left, and we were scattered all over the thing. Instinctively, every one of us got up to leave in protest to the whistles and catcalls of the gatekeepers of civil society. So when I heard Whoopi make that statement, I immediately said, well, wait a second, where does this come from?
Right.
You know, she's parroting something, because knowing that she's not an anti-Semite. So what I've said and continue to say is, okay, she's down for 2 weeks. You know, the bully pulpit, ABC, you have to have for sure accountability. That's what's missing so much in American life. Great. Okay, ABC, now what are you going to do?
Right.
You and the other media platforms, powerful media, you've done a lot to bring forward these new definitions, almost like a new dictionary of American life.
That is exactly
what are you going to do? You guys should come to the Museum of Tolerance, make an hour, or, you know, bring in The View and do a town hall. The American way is, let's hear it. I want to hear from people who say the only possible victims of racism are people of color.
Yeah.
That's absolute nonsense. Now, I say that having just also met with the top officials at the FBI about hate crimes. Here's another fact of life. Since the early 1990s until this very day, every single year, the FBI statistics show that the number one victims of race-based hate crimes in the United States are African Americans, and that the number one victims of religion-based hate crimes are Americans, Jews. Neither of us are interested to stay in first place. So is racism real? Yes. The people of color feel it in a very unique way? Yes. But as far as the Jews were concerned, we were never wide enough to save 6 million. Racism is everything what Hitler is about. When you come to the Museum of Tolerance, you will see one of the most important documents ever that we now have the original of, a 4-page typed report by Adolf Hitler before he was decommissioned from World War I, in which he was asked by his commanding officer to write about the Jews. And he wrote about the Jews, and he said, you know, this emotional pogrom stuff's not going to cut it. If you want to deal with this issue, you need a government in order to deal and remove this problem forever. You can come and see the language. And unlike anything else from that era, he signed it personally, verified by the CIA and other experts.
Wow.
It was his signature. He wrote it in 1919, 6 years before Mein Kampf, and just about 20 years from the beginning of World War II, and a little bit longer from then into the Holocaust and that disaster. So there are plenty of lessons in the 21st century for people to learn. And that's the other thing about Judaism is, you know, Mishnah Torah, as we review it again and again, every time you come to Ki Tisa, and of course we read about the ego and hang our heads in shame, but you think about the underlying power of the message that you're not a number, that everyone counts, rich or poor, in the most important place in the world. I think as we speak, you know, where the Holy Temple was and will be rebuilt, it's still the most important piece of territory. And guess what? You can give half a shekel. No one can come prancing up and saying, you see my name over there in the plaque over the Holy of the Holies? Doesn't work that way.
Incredible. What a breadth and depth of knowledge resides within you. And we're so grateful that you've shared it with us tonight. And I want to encourage everyone, I know we have a lot of viewers on the West Coast. The Simon Wiesenthal Museum and Center is an absolutely extraordinary place to visit. You need to go and spend a day there with your family. Bring a group from your church, bring your prayer group, your youth group. They have all kinds of different programs for all different age groups. The Simon Wiesenthal Center does amazing work. And in about 2 years, they're going to be opening a huge center right in the middle of Jerusalem. They've been working on that for several years. And my understanding is they're about 18 to 24 months away from opening that center. So that will be a regular part of our group tours. It's right across the street from the Friends of Zion Museum that we go through that tells the history of Christian Zionism. And Rabbi Cooper, we cannot thank you enough, sir. We know how valuable your time is, how busy your time is, and that you would elect to spend these minutes with us today is priceless to us. And we're going to share, we're going to hit the share button. We're going to get this word out there. We're going to continue to do our work to raise up Jerusalem-based Christianity. Each of us will bring our half shekel, and we'll bring our piece for the rebuilding of the spiritual and the earthly Jerusalem, and together we will do that. So I'm in Jerusalem right now. We've taped this, and I'm enjoying the Jerusalem air. I'm coming back to New York tomorrow. But Rabbi, thank you for spending this time with us tonight.
God bless. Nice to see you again, Robert.
God bless everybody. Thanks for joining us. And remember to keep praying and working for the peace of Jerusalem.